So I'd like to thank and welcome Dr. Andrew Lindsay and Dr. Tom Moore for joining us in this session today. And I'm going to hand you over to the capable hands of Andrew and Tom to chat about genetics. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Hello, everybody. My name is Tom, and I'm the director of the course at the moment, and Andy is my co-director. And what I'll do is talk very briefly about what genetics is. I'm sure you have a good idea already, and do jump in. This is very informal, and we'll try and answer. I have a list of questions, but if anybody wants to put a question in the chat or talk directly or interrupt me, that'd be great. And so Andy will jump in occasionally as well. So I guess there are lots of different sort of subdivisions of biology. Everything from biotechnology, which is really the application of what we know about genetics, to to making products for medicine or for farming and so on, through to medical genetics, which is finding the genes and the genetic variation that leads to disease in the human. That's a really important area at the moment, particularly because we've got literally hundreds of thousands of genome sequences now. But there's a whole range of different types of genetics. And one of the, I would say, the strengths of the genetics degree in UCC is that we pretty much cover all of them. So some other genetics degrees are very sort of focused or targeted on human genetics, but we do human genetics, we do animal genetics, plant genetics, and we also do a lot of what we'll call molecular and cell biology. So the sort of basic workings of genes and chromosomes in the cell, and how they produce proteins, and how that then affects how our bodies work, and how that can go wrong and give rise to disease. So genetics is really a very broad umbrella, if you like, and you can choose which part of it you enjoy the most, or you want to specialize in once you've done the basic degree. So another very general thing I'll say about genetics is that there's a lot of overlap with other biological degree courses, both in UCC and in other universities. So, some of you might be thinking, should I do genetics? Should I apply for biochemistry, microbiology, biotechnology? What are the differences? And what I would say to you in very general terms is that to some extent, it doesn't really matter which one you choose, because once you have a BSc, a Bachelor of Science degree after 4 years, your skills will overlap a lot with, if you do genetics, they'll overlap with biochemistry, with microbiology, with biotechnology. You can move across that entire range of topics quite easily in terms of the jobs that you apply for, in terms of the further study. You might do master's degrees or PhDs and so on. So I don't think you need to be too nervous about choosing one of those courses over another one. I would say that if you do choose genetics, it will be a direct entry. You're immediately then a geneticist from first year, whereas with some of the other entry, CK402, for example, which is kind of a general science entry, at the end of second year, you can stream out into different topics like food science, microbiology, biochemistry. But if you apply for genetics and you get it, then we've captured you, if you like. You're one of us. And so in the first 2 years then, and I'll let Andy talk a bit more about the first 2 years of the course, you would have specific modules in genetics that only the genetics class would be taking. But then you would share a lot of other modules or topics, for lecture topics, if you like, with other degree courses like biochemistry and microbiology. And that continues right throughout the 4 years of the course. So the course it's a kind of a standard 4-year pattern that's similar to the other science degrees. So the first 2 years, apart from those genetics modules, are fairly general. So it's to kind of get everybody up to a level, and then you really start to specialize in more in genetics in third year and fourth year. And some of the, I guess the sort of slightly less traditional types of teaching that we have in third and fourth year would be things like a literature review project, where you do a little mini research project based on the scientific literature on a topic that, you know, really of your choice to some extent. And then in fourth year, you do a 12-week laboratory project. This isn't a laboratory practical like you might have done at school, but it's actually a research project. And then you write a mini thesis and you give a presentation to the class at the end of that. So there's a sort of a progression from doing fairly general science through to specializing more in genetics and preparing you then for the job market, for further study, maybe for transfer to a master's degree that allows you to specialize in some other aspect of genetics. So for example, every year some of our students study genetic counseling. They go on to a master's in genetic counseling. So what's that? Well, more and more in medicine now, we've got a lot of information about the genetic basis for disease. And so with genome sequences, families often know that they're at significant risk of a particular genetic disease. And genetic counselors, then it's a new type of job, if you like, which people might be based in a hospital and where they meet families that carry a genetic mutation that presents a risk to their children or potential children, and they would advise them on the probability of that happening. They would give them some information about the diagnosis and possibly the treatments available and so on. So there's a huge, if you like, industry now, medical industry developing around our really deep and extensive knowledge of genetics because of, you know, genome sequencing, being able to sequence DNA in hundreds of thousands of people. And that's really having a huge effect on medicine. And so, you know, when you think about genetics, you probably studied the Mendelian laws of inheritance at school. Now, that's obviously fundamental and really important, and we'll be going into that in more detail in the genetics degree. But there are many, many other aspects of genetics that you may not be aware of. And so we'll try and cover some of those in the next hour, which you hear. But I might just hand over to Andy for a little while, so maybe he can tell you a bit more about first and second year. And then we'll, if there are no questions in the chat or directly from you, we have a list of questions that some of you will have submitted earlier that we will start to go through. So Andy, do you want to take it up?
Yes, thanks, Tom. So I teach the first year genetics class of, I'd kind of like to start off by saying that the genetics course is actually really nice, and that is we recruit 25 students every year. So it's a very small class, and that compares with kind of the biological and chemical sciences, which recruits 200 to 300 students every year. So that means you get to know your lecturers and your lecturers get to know you. And so I start teaching the genetics module in the second half of semester one. So you'll take some general kind of biology modules initially, and then I come in and we start doing this 10-credit genetics module. And so that is 36 lectures plus 12 labs over the course of, it spans semester one and semester two, and that's exclusively for the students in the genetics course. And basically it's a history lesson. We start at the very beginning. We talk about Darwin and his theory of evolution, and then we go all the way to the sequencing of the human genome, which kind of was finally sequenced in about 2001, kind of 2003. So it takes you from the start to kind of the early 2000s. And then in second year, you'll do another, obviously exclusively kind of genetics module exclusive for the class. And that'll kind of take off where we left off in first year. And you will do kind of start in kind of the genomics era. So that's kind of early 2000s up to the present day, and discussing how, so kind of the Human Genome Project itself cost about like $2 billion to $3 billion to sequence one kind of human genome. Now it costs like about less than $1,000 to do that. And that has led to kind of this huge wealth of genetic information that needs to be kind of curated and analyzed and protected and understood. And so the second year module will kind of touch on all of that and give you kind of a flavor of what's going on in kind of genetic research at the moment. kind of bring you to the cutting edge and these, kind of cutting edge techniques that you might have heard of, such as CRISPR, which won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago, which is a gene editing technique, which has huge promise to kind of change and treat various genetic disorders. But there's also kind of the caution also needs to be taken when using it as well, because it can be kind of misused as well. So you'll kind of be given an understanding of kind of the benefits and the potential risks of these kind of new modern technologies. And then, in the second year, you'll actually be doing kind of labs where you'll be using kind of genetic techniques. You'll be doing the PCR polymerase chain reaction experiments yourself. You'll be doing kind of these designed crosses where you'll be doing breeding of various different microorganisms and looking at the inheritance of traits, which is kind of the fundamental part of genetics. I think, and then so that kind of brings you in, gives you kind of an overview of what first and second year is like. You'll also be sharing a lot of modules with other degree courses. So primarily the CK402 course, which is biological and chemical sciences. In second year, you'll also be in classes with the forensic and chemical sciences degree course as well. So you won't just be exclusively within your kind of little bubble of genetic students. You'll be able to interact with students from a lot of other kind of degree courses within UCC. So you'll kind of be able to expand your kind of network of friends and colleagues beyond just those kind of 25 students in the genetics course. I think that's about it, Tom.
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, I think Ruth, should we move on to questions now?